Hello, this is author Denise Turney, and in this episode, Chisto.com YouTube episode, I am going to do a reading from my book, Escaping Toward Freedom. Escaping Toward Freedom. So I'm going to start not at the very beginning. Last week, I did a reading from my middle school book, Rosetta Blay book series, book one. This one, I started on the first page in the Rosetta book. This one, I'm going to start chapter two. So let's go. The next morning, Clarissa tossed her book bag across her shoulder and went for a brisk 6-mile run along the dirt road in front of her cabin. Loose soil flying up each time the heels of her sneakers hit the ground. Half a mile away from the end of the dirt road was a 2-lane highway that Clarissa had driven to the cabin on. Her stride was open, fluid while she ran, bringing her a deep satisfaction. Her run back to the cabin was also smooth, yet the run demanded more of her lungs, forced her to take in deeper breaths. She ran with intent, her knees rising to her abdomen, her arms moving with strength. The run felt sweet. She smiled when she spotted her cabin less than a quarter mile ahead. 5 yards from the cabin, her mood shifted. She approached the flowers at the cabin's edge. That's when she noticed it, a crack in the basement window. Even from where she stood, she saw that the crack was too large for hail or even an average sized rock to have created. To her, it was like looked like someone had tried to break the window with their fists and enter the cabin. She inched toward the window, kneeled, her knee poking grass and dirt, and pulled her gun out of the book bag. She scanned the basement, shifting her body from one side of the broken window to the other. Standing, she entered the cabin through the back door. After she locked the door, she tiptoed through the kitchen and headed down the basement steps. Her Navy training revealed itself as she turned the basement's three corners, sharp and clean, the Glock pulled up in front of her chest, the trigger pin and drop safeties off. 2 minutes later, she convinced herself that the basement was empty. She climbed the steps, reapplied her gun safety mechanisms, and returned the gun to its case in her book bag. Still, worry stabbed her thoughts. At the same time, she reminded herself of how safe the area was, how safe the area had always been. To quiet the worry, she drove to a small hardware store at the edge of the Mozart Cabins community and bought nails, plywood, masking tape, 2 security cameras, and heavy plastic. She nailed and taped the plastic and plywood to the basement window before she climbed the stairs and sat down to write, begging the muse to come, the same muse that allowed her to write a bestseller 2 years ago. She opened the picture windows, plugged in her laptop, and sat at the writing desk for 2 hours. At the end of those 2 hours, she hadn't so much as typed a paragraph. That's when she started her search for ways to move beyond writer's block. Over the next couple of weeks, she tried painting, sightseeing, talking with April twice a week, singing out loud, and cooking homemade meals. Nothing worked. I'm going to go a little bit further, just a couple of more paragraphs further. The van, a bent Texas license plate screwed above its rear bumper, looked out of place to Clarissa. On top of that, the crack in her basement window flashed across her mind. Her run slowed to a jog. This is another day. Her legs felt heavy, weary with worry. Half a mile later, she turned and raced back to her cabin. Seeing no footprints in the grass at the front of her cabin, she ran onto the porch, jammed her key in the lock, and pushed the door open. She checked the entire upstairs. Then, returning to the first floor, she checked the kitchen and later the basement. Her shoulders didn't lower until she returned to the kitchen and where she stood staring at the ceiling, working to calm her nerves. I'm gonna move a little bit further. It's nothing, she told herself as she headed upstairs. Probably just small animals playing in the backyard, creating the noise I heard earlier. Plus, all my worry about writing a novel has me so stressed that I'm getting edgy, jumpy. I have to let this stress go before I start to see everything as a threat. Going a little bit further, just a few paragraphs. She froze, salad bowl in hand. Yet all she heard were chirping birds. It's nothing, she told herself, leaving the kitchen and entering the dining room. A little bit further again. 10 minutes later, she was back in the kitchen, standing in front of the sink, washing the bowl, fork, and knife. That's when she heard it again. A thump followed by the thud of footsteps. She froze, listened, wondering if the noise was coming from the porch. Now, Clarissa, her Navy training, I'm telling you, what happens next and the decision she makes changes her life forever. And what page am I on when her life changed forever? Like this is page. This is happening fast. She starts out She's in Sandy Springs where she lives. Anybody been out in Atlanta, Georgia, Sandy Springs area? It's off of Road, Roswell Road. She's in that area at the start of the book. She's talking to her sister April. She's got to get this book written because her starting to have some financial jams. Her account is going down, and she's been a best-selling author. She's good. And then she rents a cabin in North Georgia Hills Mountains, and that's where I started in chapter 2. Before the chapter 2 is over, her whole life is going to change. I encourage you to get a copy of Escaping Toward Freedom. Escaping Toward Freedom. I think you will enjoy this story. See you back here next week. Bye for now.